Next guest, he's been in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, first time as a guest here at the State House, because there's legislation today that he'd like to discuss. Paul Roselli, Democratic candidate for governor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So the Energy Facility Siting Board Siting Act Study Commission took place from January till a couple of little months ago, and from that study commission came a piece of legislation that we hope will be considered today. So a week ago, they had a public hearing. That hearing was very successful, and now it's before the committee to consider, and we're hoping they're going to approve it.
So talk with us about the nuts and bolts. What are the improvements?
So here's the essence of the bill, and there's been a lot of talk about whether this bill will stop the power plant proposed in the northwest corner of Rhode Island. It'll have something to do with gas infrastructure and wires and all this. Here's what it does. Number one, and this is the big one, it brings Rhode Island up to date.
Okay.
Right now, we're about 31 years behind the curve. Everyone else, all the other New England states, have updated their siting and their permitting legislation. Rhode Island has not. Rhode Island is still stuck with the original legislation, the original authority, which took place way back in 1986. The second one it does, it increases the board, it increases the Energy Facility Siting Board from 3 members to 9 members. This adds a whole bunch of other things attached to it. That transparency makes subcommittees available so more people can get involved. It also provides for a public advocate, someone who would advocate for the host community and public within that host community. And third, and this is probably one of the key features of this current legislation, it's going to pay individuals who can ill afford to be on boards and commissions. And that's really important, because oftentimes these boards and commissions have people on them that are already paid, attorneys, people from nonprofits or profit agencies, or already in state governments. Rarely, if ever, are there commission members that are from the general public. And one of the reasons that they're not, look, I mean, the boards meet around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's very little transportation. There's no daycare here. There's very little amenities for anyone from the general public who's usually working at that time.
Yes.
So one of the provisions of this particular legislation is to pay these people for sitting on some of these boards and commissions. So those 3 things brings us up to speed, modernizes it, makes it more transparent, and gets a greater number of individuals from a different bunch of communities.
So what are you hearing from folks on these pieces of legislation? Is there any contention?
Yeah, so National Grid and the unions are against it for what I think are the very wrong reasons. They say it's going to inhibit growth, it'll make the process more cumbersome, it'll add to the cost of doing business in Rhode Island. Look, but let's be totally clear and honest here. Every New England state is doing this. Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, they all have many people on board. There's a greater number of people on the boards. There's a greater number of subcommittees, a lot more transparency. And this particular legislation is modeled after the one in New Hampshire. And that's key too. Actually, it's modeled after the one in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and the state of Washington. That's where this legislation comes from. So it's a good piece of legislation. And for National Grid or the unions to come on and say that it's going to stifle growth and make the process more cumbersome just doesn't work. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's where we are.
So in essence, have you just given us your testimony?
Well, I gave my testimony about a week ago, and that's exactly what I said, in a very stronger way, by the way. But I think this time around, we're guessing there'll be a sub-A. The sub-A will be introduced. There won't be any public hearing. And then we hope, cross your fingers, that at the very least it'll get out of that committee, go to the House floor. We're expecting the House floor to vote it in. On the Senate side, as of right this second, there's no corresponding legislation. So there's no companion bill on the Senate side. That's a little disappointing. But at least on the House side, looks like we're going to get a bill.
So, running for governor, we see you often up here at the State House advocating for legislation.
Sure.
What else is on your plate before the end of the session?
Sure. So there's one thing that'll also be heard today called a forest deforestation bill. This particular bill creates kind of fills a gap of an unintended consequence. The unintended consequence, if you look at your electric bill and you look on the front side and you go, oh my God, there's the bill. And then you turn it over and this is what you're paying. If you look at the second side, you'll see something in big bold letters that say, with the letters REG. That's the Renewable Energy Growth Program. Every bill is about 22 cents. So every ratepayer is paying about 22 cents into the program. And you start to wonder, where does that money go and what is it? That's to pay for renewable energy. That's to get these renewable energy projects off the ground, give them some incentives. The unintended consequence of those is that these big firms, these big solar farms, are using that money to buy big swaths of land, clear-cut forests, and put these solar farms up in places where they probably shouldn't be. Places like Coventry and North Kingstown, Weston, Cranston, big, huge areas of forest, sometimes 50, sometimes 200 acres of land. That's an enormous impact on our state's forest. We don't have that much forest. So in a way, the ratepayers are paying for that clear cutting. What this resolution bill will hopefully fix is that unintended consequence. Take that incentive away for deforestation. The money will still be there, and hopefully we'll funnel that money into where these projects should go, like landfills, capped areas, brownfields, rooftops, parking lots, and not only pay for the installation, but the engineering in some of these places. So that's what this bill is. That's what I, as a candidate for governor, are trying to get passed as well.
So you just answered my next question about, you talk about the deforestation and then the available tracts of land. So in your estimation, why do the solar companies say then that there isn't enough open space and that they need to do the deforestation?
Yeah. So as of right now, pretty much Rhode Island is maxed out in terms of its development. Just about every place you can think of for everything, for both residential and for solar, and wind as well.
Okay.
And the reason is there are large tracts of land owned by private landowners. These can range anywhere from 10 acres to over 400 or 500 acres. So what's happening is that these folks are looking for, and rightfully so, they're looking for some money, and it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to clear cut than it is to put these solar farms on some of these other areas. What we're hoping with this legislation is that we'll move some of that money into away from clear cutting and move that money into having more incentives, more money available that would then make it impossible to do clear cutting and make it more business friendly to do these solar farms on some of these other areas. Yeah, so that's where we're at.
Okay.
And I think what's really important here is that it was an unintended consequence. Some of these energy programs have been around for 20 years, and we never realized, not once 20 years ago, that we would be at the stage where we're actually paying for clear cutting of forests. But here we are, and it's time to fix it.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come on and give us a little bit of an insight into what you're going to be advocating for today at the State House. Paul Roselli, thank you for your time.
You bet.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here live at the Rhode Island State House.